Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation, Buyers Just Don't Understand, Building Trust and Bringing the Pride Back to Sales. I have two wonderful guests. I am so excited about this. I've been looking forward to it all month. Lauren Bailey from Factor 8 and Natasha Sekkat. Sekkat? How do I say your last name? Sekkat, from Panera Catering. She's a VP of Sales. So entirely excited. I do have some housekeeping before we really jump in. We will record this, so do not worry. We will send an email directly to you. So if to hop off, or if you're just like, gosh, that was so good, I have to share this with everyone, you're going to get it. Don't worry about it. And also, you are muted. No one can see you. You can eat cereal, wear sweatpants, but type your questions directly into that Q&A box. I got some really great questions actually from registration. So some of you are already in the queue. But yeah, feel free. These are smart women and you have their time. So as I said, I'm here with Natasha Sekkat, VP of Sales for Panera Catering, and I'm going to read this wonderful blurb about Panera. If you're not familiar, of course you are, but with over 2,000 bakery cafes in the US and Canada, Panera Bread pays attention to the important things like serving nourishing food that is free of artificial preservatives, sweeteners, colors, etc. And it's convenient for all. From an office meeting for 10 to a corporate conference of thousands, though, Panera Catering, which is what Natasha's in charge of, has menus for every occasion and dietary preference. So welcome to the webinar, really pumped. And then Lauren Bailey is the CEO of Factor 8. She is a longtime FOA, friend of ambition. Really, really excited anytime Lauren joins us to share her wisdom and knowledge. And Factor 8 is an award-winning training and consulting firm catering, pun intended, only to inside sales. With decades of time in the trenches and firsthand experience with over 200 inside sales organizations, Factor 8 has been turning inside sales teams into high-performing overachievers since 2007. They're known for delivering customized, actionable solutions that quickly drive top-line growth. I've seen it happen. Really excited to have you here, Lauren.
It's funny when you get introduced, isn't it, Natasha? Because you're like, oh, is that what's on my website?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what my profile says?
I didn't write that, so.
I don't know that I did either.
We're like, that's not what we do.
That's exactly what we do.
Awesome. And yeah, so, and then I am Jamie, and I am joined here with my colleague, Jamichael. He just logged in. Jamichael
and he's gone. He's still with us.
He just started and I did not help him log in, so that is on me. But I'm in marketing, so I set up the webinars, sometimes poorly, and I work at Ambition, which is a gamification and coaching software for modern high-performing sales orgs. We improve employee performance, manager effectiveness, and team culture, and we are trusted by brands like Verizon, DocuSign, HPE, ADP, the Atlanta Braves, and many, many more. So hopefully the three of us here today, I'm going to moderate and let them say smart things, can really get to the heart of a question that came up a couple of months ago. Lauren and I hopped on the phone. We were like, hey, we want to talk about some stuff. What should we talk about in 2020? What's the hot goss, the big topic? And she said, 2020 is all about bringing pride back to sales. And so we started digging into that. You know, what's the hook there that we can talk about and really unpack in a tactical way for our audience here. And it all kind of goes back to this stat that I found from Gartner, which was in the description of this webinar. But B2B sales organizations, 70% of buyers want to speak with a rep, but only 8% trust the rep that they're working with. So we've got this huge obstacle these days where, you know, people are not recognizing that sellers are evolving and that we're trying to really be experts in what we do and make sure that we're bringing value, not just, you know, hitting our numbers. And, you know, there's probably some people along the way that made that harder. But also with, as you know, more and more people are online, more and more people are making 80% of the buying journey before they ever get to that inquiry form or fill out that form. This makes it kind of more difficult for you to establish that rapport, establish that trust. And so the question that we're trying to solve today is really, how can modern sales leaders help sellers combat distrust and communicate effectively, really regardless of the channel
Yep.
And so, Lauren, I'm going to throw the first question at you because this, again, is a huge topic for you guys.
Because
Why do you?
apparently it was your damn idea, Lauren. So
Yeah, exactly.
start.
Yeah. Why are we doing this? No, but why are we in this position? Is it that we're all robots and we're all online, or have people changed, consumers or salespeople? What's
Yeah.
up?
Yeah. Well, I think there's this perfect storm of a lot of change, and I am just so passionate about this right now. I may have been drinking a bottle of champagne with my husband, who's also in the industry. It was towards the end of the year, and we were talking about like, oh my gosh, nobody's ever noticed that it's actually the change of a decade, right? I think we're all still embarrassed about what we, feared was going to happen back in 1999. And it's a brand new decade. And we were thinking back to what was sales 10 years ago. I mean, think about all that's changed in the last 10 years in our industry, right? And now, how has sales sort of contributed to that, or maybe been impacted by that? And that's where we are. So there's a couple things in this perfect storm. Number one, we have to look at, like you just said, Jamie, the buyer's journey, okay? Mm-hmm. 10 years ago, if you wanted to know something, you called a rep, right? And now you do all your research yourself, and you're pissed if you have to go beyond a chat. Like, what do you mean I can't just chat with somebody? I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm good, okay? And when I want to talk with someone, it's because I have 7 specific questions. And if you don't know those answers immediately, forget about it. Mm-hmm. In fact, the latest stat I saw from HubSpot took 8% to 3% Ooh. Of buyers trust salespeople. It's dropping, right? It's plummeting rapidly. There's a tiny silver lining in this. We still have 1.5 points on politicians. There's that. 1.5 politicians, 3% salespeople. So that's sad to me. It's really sad. So the buyer's journey and their knowledge is trend number 1. Trend number 2, I want to just give a hats off to our marketing departments, but holy Martech, okay? Marketing departments grew with the buyers, man, like crazy. We have tools and analytics and alerts and everything possible about mapping to this buyer. They grew right with the customer, didn't they? Marketing used to be like, oh yeah, they were over there, and they are leading the way. And as a flag holding salesperson, that pisses me off a little bit. Sorry, Jamie. Hey, I'm a little jealous. Right? So I think that they went crazy and stayed with the customer, right? And we did our best on the sales side with tools as well, but they were mostly operational tools. Mm-hmm. 10 years ago, like it was, let's make sure we have a good CRM and let's make sure we have a decent phone switch, and it lived in a whole closet, right? Mm-hmm. And now the average number of tools per rep is about 7. So there's so much more we're expecting out of reps. Mm-hmm. And then here's the last thing that's happening. Unemployment is going down, and the demand for inside sales reps is going up. Inside sales is growing at 10 to 17 times field. Wow. So we have fewer reps, less experienced, expected to do more. The customers expected to know more, right? And we haven't really changed how we're selling, and mostly how we're dealing with these new people on our teams. Okay. And we're seeing that last trend. I swear, guys, I'm going to get off my soapbox in a second. I'm like mm-hmm, yes. Right. Yeah. Here's this last thing that's happening that just, it makes me sad is 10 years ago, the average lifespan of a sales rep was closer to 3 years. Now we are just over a year. The last stat I saw was about 14 months. So we're bringing them in by the droves. Mm-hmm. We're hyping expectations and tools. We're not developing them and managing them differently to respond to the customer, right? And they are exiting as fast as they can. We're teaching young people to hate sales, and that pisses me off. So this is it. This is our decade to catch up. And I know that when we get there is when people are going to be like, I'm in sales, damn it, and I'm proud. Right? Yeah. But 90% of the people I talk to now tell this story about, well, I didn't mean to wind up in sales. It's for this accident, right? Especially the Women and Girls Club. They're like, oh, well, I didn't mean to be. Yeah. And forget that. Like when we get this right, we're going to bring the pride back because we're doing it better, and we're keeping our people, and we're engaging our customers. I will not talk for 3 straight minutes.
No, I mean, and I think that is, all of that is, I mean, that's exactly why we're talking about this. And that's a much more nuanced answer than just technology. There's a lot of it. I do you have anything to add to that, Natasha? Are you?
No, totally. Did you see me? I'm like, preach.
No.
Like all of that, like
Yeah.
that's why we get along so well, Lauren. We always have so much fun. But no, I think just to kind of echo some of the points, and in preparation for this, I took some notes down. And I was one of the people that I will talk about how I accidentally ended up in sales. Started my career as a management consultant. I expected to kind of go down more of that path, and ended up selling additional engagements with my clients, and ended up falling into roles where it was like, well, why am I not getting paid a commission on this? And there's this job that's called a sales job. I also am the daughter of 2 professional violinists, so that doesn't really help the math very much on this either. But I completely fell into it and love it. And when you really break down what sales is such a dynamic profession. And in the past, I think it very much was framed as it's a personality job. And that's actually not at all true. Yeah. The personality is part of it, of course. Being a human, there's a personality element to just being a human. But between the science of selling, between the intelligence and the research that's involved with being an effective seller, right? And that's sort of the distinguishing point here. What I think is really happening, my view on this is, you can't be a mediocre salesperson anymore. You can't depend on the make friends, make money anymore, because it's not enough. Our buyers know better, and they have other options. And so what that means is the salespeople, people who venture into sales, it is more of a profession. It is more of a vocation, and there's skills and there's knowledge and there's work, not just sales work, right, and selling work that has to happen, but actually development work that has to happen behind the scenes to be effective in these roles. And so one of the things that I loved, I spent 12 years at EMC Corporation, which was an amazing experience for me. And we were one of the first sponsors of the colleges that were creating sales management programs that were either majors or minors, and like really treating it as an academic thing. And these programs are now across the country. Like, I was just, kind of refreshing my knowledge of which schools have them. And there's
how many?
It's like almost 200, I want to say.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. It was like 11, not very long ago. Yeah.
It was 0 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's this like seismic shift that's happening now around treating sales really as a career. You can have a career, you can exit college, with this. And I think it really does kind of circle this buyer's journey, and the fact that sales has to catch up. Sales as a vocation has to catch up with our buyers, and if we don't, then all of the stats, the scary stats that Lauren just shared, they're not going to get better.
We actually will be replaced by computers.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a bummer for the buyer.
Totally.
It's a huge bummer for the buyer. And, we talk a lot here at Ambition. So we provide software that helps you with lots of different aspects of your program, but specifically coaching. And what we found, coming in, we're sort of a new marketing team last year, but, one of the first things coming in and sort of assessing the industry and the market that struck a lot of us was just that nobody that we are talking to really went to school for sales. Like, that isn't, to your point, it's only now being something where we're realizing this is a vocation, this is something to address, we should build programs. But so many of the current buyers, or the people that we're really talking to, and I know that Lauren's probably talking to, are all in the same position that we once were, which is, I worked at a shoe store and then I went to a different job, and it's like, oh, I'm good at talking to people. Well, all that kind of stuff. And so we see a lot of people who are now sort of having to learn probably what some of their, people that they'll be competing with for jobs are learning in a regimented kind of way. And so I think that that brings up a great point, where if the audience really for today's conversation is sort of, how do we bridge that gap? How do we make sure that our sales leaders are giving young reps who maybe just missed or just are off the cusp of being in those programs, that's who we're talking to today. How do we bring them into now? How do we help sort of maybe break some of the habits that they learned 10 years ago? And how do we help people evolve that conversation? You know, it is harder and harder. Someone can't just get on the phone. So really for either of you, how do you coach your reps, or how do you coach clients to sort of break through that noise? Or what can salespeople do quickly in the chat or in these other channels that are a little bit more removed than video chat or a phone? And
There's
either
two levels to
one.
this, isn't there,
Yeah.
Jamie? Like you were saying, as sales leaders, there's this level of sales leaders that we're going to have to recruit differently. I mean, we've all experienced that, right? If you're not scraping the bottom of the barrel today, you will be soon, right? And I'm going to say it again, a decade ago, it was, oh, I'm looking for 4 years of college, 2 years of sales, and played a competitive sport. Every single person I talk to, that's the profile. And you read the job descriptions, and we've gotten smart about trying to not oversell sales. We put in there, oh, well, you're going to be making 50 calls a day, and your job is to, and we advertise the actions and the objectives from our point of view, right? And then we throw them into the same training that we had 10 years ago, and off we go. And that, I think, is a fail point at leaders. Like, we're going to have to be able to recruit different pools of people. And I can't wait to hear Natasha talk about that, because you've definitely done that. Right. But those people aren't available anymore, because guess what? By the time they have 2 years of sales experience, they're dunsies. They're done. They're out. So we have to be able to recruit teachers and moms and mechanics and 2-year degree people and retirees. And we got to get creative, which means we're going to have to teach them more than we used to have to do. We had 1 billion people and we could cherry pick, right? I mean, it was sink or swim. And when you floated to the top, then you got to stay. And we can't do it that way anymore. So that's that leadership level. And I definitely want to talk into the rep level too, of how do you stand out and engage with the customer. But do you mind if I throw it to Natasha for just a second? Because you've got a huge team, and you figured this out.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're well over 100 sales reps at this point, and have what I call swim lanes. So we have specialties kind of built within that, where there's specific parts of the customer journey that each team is focused on. But our team works out of their homes. So to Lauren's point, you know, having spent 20 some years in IT, this is my first organization that I came in, and I'm like, how do I recruit men? Like, I need to diversify my male population of sellers, because, you know, men buy too. Like, so it's been a very, very funny dynamic. Also the generational dynamic. We have people from, I think there's 5 generations that are working right now. I have people in all 5. We celebrated some retirements in Q4, which, you know, again, that you don't see that quite as often in some other spaces. But, you know, what you find is the diversity, which is, I think that's the point I would hit on from Lauren's comments. It's the diversity of staff aligning to the diversity of customers. And so it's very interesting when you hear from the boomers, you know, who are kind of getting a bad rap right now on social media, but you hear from the boomers, you know, how they perceive their roles as salespeople, you know, and how as buyers they perceive how sellers should be with them, versus the millennials, right? And sort of the very, very early, I can't even, is it Z now or something, Generation Z, I think.
We're going to start over on A.
Yeah, right. I mean, so you kind of see these dynamics. And so that is definitely something that that we've been harnessing, is the diversity of thought, the diversity of perspectives. But I think too, you know, outside of even just the talent piece of it, you know, to Lauren's point, I was marinated in the, you know, it's college athletics, it's a couple years of sales. And I think that model does work. I mean, no question, there's many millions of dollars that have been brought into the economy because of that model. But at the same time, I've seen massive success from musicians, right? Because they have this mindset, or this like right? This creative mindset, and they have the discipline to master their craft and think about stuff, right? And so I think what I've seen kind of as the bigger differentiator, and it is harder to recruit for, is intellectual curiosity. Because when you really break it down, what do buyers want, right? And this is the topic, is building trust with buyers. Buyers don't care about you. Buyers don't care about your product. Buyers are selfish, and they have the money, so they get to be selfish. They care about themselves. And it's not their job to educate you. It's your job to understand them. And so there's this like power shift, right, in terms of the journey, but there's also this innate engagement shift that's also happening where, you know, myself as a buyer, if someone's firing off 20 questions at me, I'm like, yeah, I'm all set with it. Like, exactly. Like I'm done. Whereas people who lead with insights, people who tell stories that engage me and are like, I understand you and I can help you, right? It's a very different thing versus the I'm great at pitches sales mentality.
That curiosity has to pull through, right? And that's the problem. So when we lead with our pitch script or right, the ask for demo or the whatever, and not with the curiosity of, hey, I noticed you downloaded this. What's going on with you? And right, how can I add value? Right? Yes. Instead, it's like, well, I noticed that you downloaded something, and so my marketing team sent it to me, and I'm calling to set up a demo. Okay, I get it, but what you're doing, we've taught reps to just parrot their objectives instead of looking at it through the eyes of the buyer. And we perpetuate that as leaders. Honestly, you guys, all the way back to the job description. How much of our job description is focused on the customer and getting to know the customer and sales as a service profession? Because it is, right? And then how much of our training is focused on that? I audit training, right, for a living, and 80% of it is product and systems. And very, very little is about what's going on with the customer and the industry and getting to know them. And I think that's a massive gap that we can fill. And that knowledge is sitting in all of our departments. You don't have to hire somebody externally to bring that in. Right? We just have to help our reps grab it and then translate it into how our products and services serve that. And light bulbs go on when we do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say that, you know, I think that's a fantastic point, but, you know, let's say I come in, we don't connect immediately. You're chasing me around. I'm going quiet. Obviously we talk a lot internally between Never. No, but nobody, you know, with marketing and our frontline sellers, you know, we just had our first ever SDKO. So, and it was so fun. Our entire SDR team came here. We're based in Nashville, had a blast. And it was such valuable time for us on the marketing side to sit with them and just say, what are, you know, we're building all this content for you. Conversely, that we're telling you is valuable to the buyer, but like you guys have to give that back to us. And so I think that wasn't just like, we're so great, but in an ongoing sort of conversation, you know, questions that they had that really I'm just selfishly getting answered on this webinar what are some of those touch points along the way? You know, obviously people are making these decisions, trying to avoid getting on the phone as much as they possibly can. Typically by the time they inbound, they've already sized up like, I can afford this, I know what's happening, and or your marketing team's withholding just enough information where I have to now pick up the phone. What kind of value, aside from just sending content, have you seen be successful with reps who aren't connecting? So, you know, it's not just once they're on the phone that I'm giving value, but like what, you know, is it a stellar LinkedIn presence? Is it, how do they build sort of that trust before we ever even get them on the phone?
I can take a first pass at this. I mean, I sort of alluded to it earlier, but the thing that I've seen over the years, it's really stories. Humans are hardwired for storytelling, right? We get more engaged with stories. We imagine ourselves in stories, right? Like there's a psychological thing around stories. And for me, when we start talking about chasing dark leads, I start getting the like hair on the back of my neck of like, why are we chasing dark leads? You know, because there's a reason why they went dark, you know, and there's lots of possibilities of why. And I feel like the training, you know, not Lauren's training, but other training is send the creepy email asking if you've been eaten by a crocodile. And like, no one's going to, no, I got that one, Lauren. Like, no one's going to, I was asked if he's speaking to dead people. That was my favorite one was, I feel like Bruce Willis. I feel like Bruce Willis, and am I speaking to dead people? And I was like, are you saying that I'm dead? Because I'm pretty sure I'm not dead. So, you know, that's sort of the ghost.
Dead to me, so.
Yeah, you know, so that's the aggressive me-centric approach, right? Is pay attention to me. What's going on with me? And it doesn't work. And there's so many different reasons we could unpack, right, of why it doesn't work. But I think what does work is being respectful, and what does work is leading with insight, which is something that you know that they don't know, ideally about them, right? So it comes back to stories. It's, well, you know, Lauren, your white paper download. Well, I noticed that this person is in the radiology department at a hospital, right? And this white paper is on, you know, document management or something, right? So you could say, I actually was just talking to someone at a radiology department the other day, and here was what they were trying to solve. How close or far is this from what you're trying to solve, right? That is a completely different conversation than, hey, let me get you on a demo, to Lauren's point, right? And this is something that, you know, I think a lot of new reps shy away from because they're like, well, Natasha, I don't have the stories. But someone has the stories, right? It would, again, to kind of Lauren's point, like there's enough conversations that are happening with clients and prospects and, you know, history and historicals and other companies and whatever, like the stories are out there. So for me, what it really comes back to is, have you as a sales rep built your inventory of stories for your use cases, for your target ideal customer profiles, and have you mastered, you know, how to tell them, how to engage with them. And then, you know, and then in a respectful way, you start to kind of tease these things out versus the, I'm so desperate for you to talk to me, you know, how can we figure this out? Which is sometimes will work, but generally it doesn't.
It's so good.
I
So
love that.
Right. Okay, Natasha, I'm going to translate this for our sales managers on the phone who want to use this tip. Here's how we've done this with training classes in the past. So you grab your team together. Everybody pulls their 2 or 3 favorite testimonials, case studies, and personal stories. So everyone's going to come with 4 to 6 to this group, right? You're brand new. You're getting them from the website. Been there a while. They're all personal stories. Everyone has a chance to tell the story. Right? People are taking notes, listening to their favorites, and then you need to help them practice making it their own. Okay. And what people are usually missing are the interesting details, right? It can come off. You've got to practice it or it's as bad as a script. Okay. Well, I wanted to tell you about a most recent buyer who saw a 307% ROI by implementing ambition. That sucks. That's a pitch. Different, right? So, oh my gosh, that reminds me of Natasha. We were talking to her last week. In fact, I think she's up in your area. Super cool lady. Love what she's doing, but she was struggling with blank. And so after she looked around a little bit, like you try not to make yourself sound good.
Yeah.
Oh, she didn't think she was going to go with us and we were happy for her no matter what. But here's what we were able to solve for her. And I was thinking that might be some of the same thing that's going on with you. So you make it conversational and you practice it with them where they're not embarrassed telling the story to their peers. Like if they can't say it out loud to their peers without writing it down or reading it or keeping it a straight face, then they're using too many marketing words and buzzwords. And that's crap, right? It doesn't work. So just a quick tip on turning stories into their own.
I love that. And what I love about that too is I think a lot of reps are like, yeah, I know I should personalize. I'm hearing that over and over and over again. But what I love about that approach is that is personalization at scale, because you don't have to necessarily, I mean, obviously there are certain sales where you need to do a ton of research about this specific contact that you're calling. But, you know, we have these conversations a lot internally. So I think that's a great way to make it personal at a high level without, again, being
Bingo.
creepy or
Yeah.
accusing you of being dead or
Yeah.
or not being efficient with their time as well,
Cool.
because they're having trouble doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to that original question too. You were like, what's happening when you're getting ghosted?
Yeah.
Right? And what can a rep do to try to
Yeah.
get them back in? And I would say let's start 2 beats earlier and look at how a rep started. Okay, so somebody may think I'm ghosting them, but the truth is I've never once engaged, right? So when I get spammed in my email and in my LinkedIn, and then I get 3 or 4 emails again afterwards saying, hey, did you see my last message? Hey, why haven't you contacted me back? And you can feel them getting frustrated and angry, which means I will never, ever, ever, ever work with them or their company at that stage, right? We all have that feeling. So let's make sure we're starting well, okay? Then after we're getting somebody, they're engaged a little bit, but they go dark. I think that there's a couple common mistakes. And honestly, the first mistake is that we give up too soon. An InsideSales.com study, it's a couple years old, but let me tell you, it's probably gone down, not up. Only 10% of reps will make 3 or more attempts. And I'm talking phone, okay? Because you can't sell over email or social. Right? You're establishing your credibility and brand that way, maybe getting some attention, right? Some recognition, but nobody's going to reply back and be like, yes, I've been waiting for you to email me. I'll take that one. Right? It doesn't work. So only 10% are making more than 3. And the study says that it's going to take all the way up to 6+, and I think that number's probably gone up, to actually get somebody to engage with you. Now, we sell to sales leaders and they're tough, right? Because they know, like, if you don't have the grit to keep after me, forget about it. I don't know that there's a lot of buyers out there who haven't had that experience, right? I'm waiting to see if they're going to give up or not. And I'm waiting to see if they're intriguing me along the way, right? So vast majority aren't even leaving voicemails. So that's a bummer. 30% of the leads we're giving reps aren't even getting contacted at all. So like, there's 2 things we can do before we get to they were talking to me, we shot a proposal, they ghosted.
Yeah.
Right. And then I love the other tips that Natasha's talking about in leading with value, 100%. Personalizing that. This is the time to say, hey, I noticed that you this, that, or other on LinkedIn. And you don't have to do that in the massive blast every time. We're talking about individuals. You can put a little bit more time into that. What are the top 3 reasons that people ghost? And now how can you add value to that process? Notice you haven't gotten back to me. Typically when that happens, I'm finding that. Insert something here, right? I hope this can be helpful. I'm here when you're ready. So like, I'm trying to engage as a trusted advisor, not in a greedy, I got a number to hit this week person. And there's a difference in that. And the last tip is to pull value into those messages, right? The top 3 things busy people care about is saving time, saving money, and making it easier for me. So how can I lead with a message of value instead of, creepy crocodiles?
There are 2 things. There are 2 things that you just made me think about too, Lauren, and then I've experienced them in multiple places. Is, number 1, there's this misconception that there's a linear relationship between the number of touches and the return. And so even when reps are educated on the stat, because I feel like that stat has traveled pretty well. Like a lot of them know, right? Like no one reaches out, but you have to hit this number. But what I've found over the years is that they don't realize that it's an inflection point number, meaning you have to get to that number for something to happen, not, oh, well, I half did it, so therefore I'm going to get half the return.
Right.
Right. And it's like, no, like that's the inflection point. You have to get to that point for things to even start popping. And so that's a major sort of misconception, I think, around how that stat gets interpreted. And then the other part of it is, and I honestly, I would look at this as our earlier comments around marketing, keeping up with things. One of the negative implications of that for salespeople is everything is programmatic now. So you have a sequence that you go through, and this is email 5, and this is voicemail 2, and da 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 da. And so when you start, assuming you had engagement to begin with, right, kind of to your point, Lauren, I find that managers are often now sort of sales managers are taking a little bit of a hands-off approach of like, well, that's the science, that's our sequence, that's our whatever, versus taking an intellectual approach of, well, obviously whatever we've sent hasn't resonated with this client. So how can we flip the script? How can we break out of the mold? Because, I'm getting prospected by people all the time, but there's these couple that I must be in their cycle like right now. So, it's like, to your point, Lauren, it's like when you know the script, it's pretty funny to see the execution of it, right? So it's like, I'm like, oh, is tomorrow the day that I'm going to get the breakup email?
Yeah, last ditch.
Right, whereas their best option at this point is not to send me the clearly spam template, and their best option would be to be like, actually, prospect me about this. Like, Natasha, I saw you were on this webinar, and like, what got you interested in talking about that topic? Because I would be so caught off balance, like, wait, you sent me this, you sent me that, and now this is the experience that I actually might be prompted to respond just for that purpose, right?
I do sometimes respond to it, and I'm like, damn good email.
Yeah.
Nice work.
Yes.
No interest in your product whatsoever, but keep it up.
Yeah. I do that constantly. If I get a great email, because I came from MarTech and have been in sales, I'm like, good on you. Yeah, I don't sell this, so your data person's bad, but this is great. Like, I am not your buyer, but you're great.
Right? They're just off. And that, you guys, that's how we've overtooled. That's it, right? We've bought the lists, we've built the cadence, we've turned the machine on, and then we've hired our reps to come in with their scripts and catch the 0.2% that will come out at each stage. And that's a bummer, right? Which is also, by the way, hilarious to me, because we go out and try to hire reps that have, let's go back to what we said, personality, right? There's a million things that you can do, but if we connect with them, we go through this interview process, right? Are they our people? Can they connect? And then we give them a freaking script. Like, the number one thing I think we can do is, I don't want to say rip them up, right? But just do step 2. Like, I get it. You're trying to do this at scale. So you wrote a script, and every customer hears it and hates it and doesn't stick to it. Can we agree that they suck and it's time to go past it? Right. So if you've got a script, I want to set fire to it, but it's okay. We'll do something, grab it, and instead say, all right, well, you see this part here? This is the opening, right? What's the goal? You guys, it's a 30-minute training session to translate the script. The rep doesn't understand what they're trying to do during this period. Help them get the goal, then help them put it in their own words, and then encourage them to let their freak flag fly, right? Like, if you love your bulldog better than your husband, find a way to say that in the next first 2 minutes, because you're different. And we're hiring personality and then masking them, which is a bummer, right? It's a confidence killer and it's an engagement killer.
So we gotta go. And honestly, I'm doing the worst job moderating. I had all these questions, and I'm just like, this conversation is wonderful. Question.
I may be going off script, by the way.
I burned the script. Don't worry. We're gonna let our freak flag fly.
Script burning. How great would that be?
Yeah.
Big rally.
Burn that script. So this is a perfect question for Natasha. This actually comes from one of our customers, Bobby. And Bobby wants to know, how is managing a remote team, different from managing a team in the office? And so you kind of touched on that earlier, but man, I'm so excited to have your thoughts on this, and both of you, because I think that is exactly like everything that we've talked about, coaching these reps. We can have a session where we pay someone who's awesome to come in and help us do a session, but how do you consistently reinforce it? Is it regimented one-on-ones? Is it, you do lose something by being remote that you can't have physically in the office, but more and more our teams are distributed. So how do you do that?
I mean, I've managed remote teams before, but this is the first pretty much 100% remote team at scale that I've managed, and it's hard. I mean, it is not for the faint of heart. frontline managers who have, 100% remote teams, like, hats off, love you. Like, it's intense. So I think there's some foundational things that are most important, which is you have to hire people that embrace your mission. You have to hire people that are aligned to your cultural values, right? So like the I'm going to try to make things work with this rep could work in a person environment because you can surround them and brainwash them and get them to drink the Kool-Aid and all of that cool stuff. But like when they're remote, it does not work very well. Never say never, but like generally speaking, you really need them to espouse your values and believe in the direction that you're taking. So that's sort of like groundwork. You got to have the tools in place to manage a remote team. So being able to have messaging, being able to have video and see them and have that personal connection, having travel budgets so that you can get out there and actually grab a drink with them, or, have a sit down and see them working and, experience their environments would be another sort of foundational piece. So I think there's also sort of the like price of entry stuff that take, but for us, what I think, kind of my biggest lesson is you have to be way more focused and specific in what your expectations are, because there isn't the water cooler talk that clarifies, well, when Natasha said this is what she meant. What you'll tend to get more of is the like, oh my gosh, what did she mean? No one understands, but no one's going to remotely come back and try to clarify things. And so, you have to be very specific of, our expectation is this approach to your business. Here are the tools that are going to support that approach to your business. Here are the check-ins. Like, we're going to have check-ins throughout the day, or we're going to have check-ins throughout the week, depending on what the topic is, right? But you have to be a much more active manager than when you're not in a remote environment. That's probably like what I would. So again, I talked a little bit before about the sales managers that are like, oh, hands off. Like, I hire the best people and my job is to let them go. Not sure I totally agree with that, right? And in a remote environment, that's a recipe for failure. Like, you just can't, because inherently remote workers tend to feel less connected. They tend to feel, less joy, right? I mean, because they're not having the camaraderie, they're not having the engagement, they feel less connected to what the strategy is and what the mission is. And so, I've implemented, at one point I was doing monthly all hands as we were going through, change management, to just make sure that the team had access to me. I sponsor brown bags so that there's a casual environment, with a handful of people that they always know. And so, one of kind of my prouder moments was one of our reps had recently said that this was the first sales leadership team where there's an active focus on getting feedback from the group, and that, she's never seen kind of the openness that we have around that. And so I think, if you're trying to unlock remote team management, those are some of the things that sort of differentiate the okay versus, starting to move to best in class.
That's so good. I couldn't do it without Zoom.
Yeah.
Like, being able to see people is a big deal. I know, like, as I'm hiring remote people on my team, they're asking how we do that. I'm like, I guess I never really thought about the fact we're remote. I don't have 160 people, right? We're at like 16, but that makes a big difference. And the reward and recognition that you're doing, like, part of what makes inside sales centers fun is that there's a buzz, right? There's the leaderboards, and there's gongs, and there's stupid trolls with their heads stuck on 2x4s or trophies. And so how can we do that remotely? And I think that well, I'm sorry, sounds really pitchy, but it's better than bitchy. The ambition tools and those like it, it's there it is. And it's just the same for them. And it's right there. So even though I'm in Podunk, Minnesota, sorry guys, like, I can still be top of the leaderboard. And then celebration channels make a big difference. And Natasha, I really want to applaud what you said about, you've got to be more direct in your management, which means we have to help our front line do a really good job of setting expectations. We were talking about this at the senior executive retreat that AAISP does. I was leading a session on remote. My job's just to facilitate, right? I learned more than I taught in that session. And we talked about a lot of remote worker fails and how we have to kind of sit down and have this remote worker contract. Like, here's what you've got to prepare for, and here's my expectations, and by when. And it can't just be about the metrics, guys, because when you can't be there to be the guardrails and bump people back in, it's got to be about the behaviors. It's got to be about the tasks. It's got to be about the actions. It's got to be about things that you wouldn't even think about, hours of clocking in and what you're wearing, and right? It opens up a whole other bag of stuff. With my small team, I don't think I'm great at this yet. I'm trying, but I try to do one-on-one touches so that they don't feel disconnected. Nobody's more connected to leadership at Factor8 than anybody else is, because we've got the one-to-one relationship with everybody outside of the team meetings or the Slacks or the Ambition.
That was a lovely promo. I do appreciate it. I mean, but
cool
it is
about
true.
You guys.
Well, and it is true. And, you know, I think another thing, this is my last question, but it is something that we talk about a lot here. And so I feel like Lauren, where I'm just learning, like basically I'm selfishly going to ask my own question, but you know, you guys spoke so beautifully to hiring and why that matters. And really that wasn't even a question that I had. And I'm glad that we spent so much time there, because I do agree. No, honestly, like I think that made this, I think that is so important. However, you know, let's say you are just seeing this webinar and you're like, oh no, I have tons of people that I want to make them be like this person on my team. You know, I've got my top performers. They are exemplifying everything that we've talked about on this call. They're storytellers. They know how to connect. They break protocol when needed to get the job done, to really, you know, build rapport. And we've had several questions actually come in that use this word. I think it's really fascinating. How do I not sound like a scammer? Someone asked that before and on this call. And so I think obviously these people who are probably excelling in these jobs never sound that way. And I think you spoke really well to it earlier, where it is more about like, can you have this, you know, do you sound like a scammer when you talk to your friends? If so, that might be a personal issue, but really it's, you know, how do you mimic that language? But, you know, some people again are really good at this. And so I think combining what we just talked about with scaling just your management, how do you scale the, hey, look at this person, or hey, can you be a little bit more like so-and-so when they don't see each other every day, or when they aren't necessarily with each other? We have the visibility with tools like Ambition so that I know who's on the leaderboard, and you know, and obviously you can design programs that don't just benefit the top performers and that kind of thing, but how do you kind of have them learn from each other and do sort of peer-to-peer learning in these environments?
So how do we replicate our top performers? How do we help people sound less scammy? And how do we do it, especially when it's remote?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, nice one. Okay. So I'm going to go one at a time and go quickly and toss it to the real expert here. So when we're looking at replicating a top performer, I think that it's important we say and realize, as especially a lot of new managers out there, as so many of us are, we'll always have a bell curve, folks. You were an A performer, and that's why you were in management. And you will make your number every single month on the backs of your B performers, not your A's. So yes, strive to help your B's be the best they can and to be A's, but recognize, please, you're not failing because your whole team aren't A's. 1 out of 10 to 12 to 15 is going to get there. It's at like 13.7. So that's it, right? And now, how do you help scale towards that? Well, I think that we want to make sure the managers are pulling in their other resources. Okay. We do have to do this not just with coaching, but with training. Too many managers are trying to teach it all individually to people, and we're setting them up to fail. Okay. Align with your onboarding department, with your training department, with whatever it is that's pulling these people in, and make sure that we're teaching them about customers, about stories, about industry, right? That we're pulling the script and teaching them the goals of the calls, getting their personality. They should come to you having been trained on those things. Now your job is to coach their execution, tapping them in right directions, working on one thing at a time, showing what good looks like and why, but helping encourage them to find their own way to it. Okay. So in that way, scripts are killing us. Call quality forms can be really helpful if they're coaching forms, not she adhered to the script in these ways, right? If you have a QA department that's outsourced to India, you know you have a problem. Sort of like that, here's your sign. So the last part was, how do you do that remotely? And I'm going to go to a tool for that one. You have to have your conversational intelligence tools, right? Your course, your gong, your exact vision. You got to then do more with it than just look at the analytics, but pull together call libraries, right? Have always got to do call coaching sessions with individually, but then pulling in some of your top performers and doing some of the group coaching. My advice is keep it under 3. If over 3, it's a training, not a coaching. So everybody can play a call and find their strengths and work on one thing at a time to tap closer and closer, nudging to the A's.
Love that.
Mouthful. How do you do it, Natasha?
So I agree with every single thing that you said. I'm going to take a different lens on it though. So a lot of times what you hear when you hear like, this person's my A player, I want everyone like them, it's a little bit of a false narrative. And so what I mean by that is I've spent a lot of time studying situational leadership, which is really about skill-based or knowledge-based mapping, right, of where people are in their development. And so what I found ends up happening is managers look at the highest level, not below the covers, to say, actually, we were sort of talking about this before, like, what are the skills, behaviors, or knowledge that I need my team to have to be successful? And who are the best people on my team for each of those things? And so what I've seen is sometimes actually your C players are amazing at some of those things, but they're maybe the less important ones, or, you know, they're not the biggest revenue generating ones or things like that. And so what I think, you know, maybe this is just my leadership style, but what I found helps is you want to have everyone participating in this, because I've worked on the teams where you have the golden child and nobody wants to be on that team. Even if they are a golden child and they're untouchable, like, it doesn't feel good to see and to feel. So what I think, you know, my approach is more of like, what actually are we trying to do here? Is there a broader range of people that can come to the table to highlight what they've been successful at and how they're approaching things? And yes, it's about the sales calls, but it's also about, how are you managing your day? How are you thinking about your book of business? How are you approaching your territory and identifying the next prospects for you and the next opportunities for you, right? And so taking that sort of broader look as a business owner, kind of that like business owner mentality, and then setting up this best practice sharing, but in a broader sense, that's something that I've seen success with over the years.
That's good. I like how you're pulling skills from all levels.
Yes.
Right. So when we talk about putting out a call library, so here's some great examples of working with gatekeepers. And here's some really good examples of providing insights, stories, questions, voicemails, and everybody has a chance to shine then. Really cool.
I love that. All right, guys, I think we have time for maybe one more question. So I'm gonna dig in here and see what we've got. All right. Okay, so I know we talked about, obviously, I loved your quote earlier, Lauren, about, you know, you're really building trust in these other places, but the phone is still where it's at, which I love. So specifically just digging into that a little bit more, we had a couple of questions, but Malik specifically wants to know, how do I build trust over social media and internet channels? So we kind of have touched on this, you know, obviously the stories are a great thing, but at scale, like what does that look like? Like what should these reps be doing on LinkedIn? We are constantly talking to our reps about, like, please get on there, like talk about yourself. Like you don't need to just share marketing's messaging there, but what specifically have you seen be successful in those other places that kind of help tell that whole story about your team?
That's a good one. You want to go first, Natasha?
Yeah, so I think this is a little bit tough, right? Because you do have a big population of new sellers, right? Back to Lauren's point that there's this like revolving door of people trying sales
Yeah.
on size and then like exiting out the other the other end of the building. So, the conversation that I've seen more of is they're like, well, I don't want to put my picture up on LinkedIn because I look like a child. And I'm like, but you do look like a child. Like that's who you are. Like that's like embrace your authenticity. And there's still things that and there's still things that you can do. And I think that kind of echoes the 3% of buyers, believe sales reps or trust in sales reps, where like you're new to sales, right? So you don't have this baggage associated with you of like, I've lied to all of these clients and fabricated deals, that were fake and stuff. So I think it's really going back to being authentic. And so I had reps that went like, they were super into music. And so they built up their social presence around music. And then if they found prospects that had anything that was music related, they doubled down on, we have something in common.
Yeah.
And like, I like music too, or I saw that, you liked this thing. And, there's a bunch of different versions, but, I think it's, again, sort of thinking about it differently and, and figuring out how do you expose and sort of show yourself as a human, as an authentic being, versus I'm just going to take whatever marketing gave me or my sales manager gave me and I'm going to plaster it everywhere.
Yeah. I think we also have unrealistic expectations of our 20 somethings, right? Again, as sales leaders, we want everything fast. So we've learned, thought leadership, right? And so some of us let reps free on thought leadership. And what winds up happening is the spamedemic. And I'm just going to go out and try to get leads that way. And I'm going to post my own content. And most of us have realized that that's a freaking train wreck. Then you've got this other side of people who aren't managing it. And you've got reps with no profile pictures, not well done profile. So I think we've got to walk and, crawl, walk, run. So let's start with profile pictures and encouraging people to be honest in themselves. Let's not give everybody a template, but in the about, let's be wise, right? And then as you're building in your career, you guys, what I would look for is, are you active? Is anybody following you? Like, do you have any connections? Or are you just going to pop right out of this sucker someday? And then I look to see who you're following. Like, your job as you're getting in there for your first 5 years is just to go curate your own content. Are you curious? Are you liking? Are you sharing? You're not a thought leader yet. You're 20. Quit pretending that you are. So just start by building your community and being authentic. Best word ever. And then what can people do on social media to gain trust? Show that they're following the industry, show that they're knowledgeable in that area. Never, ever, ever lead with a pitch is another one, right? And make personalized, authentic connections. Right, I noticed you blank, or I really admired the blank. Don't use it as a sales tool, okay? It's for them to get to know and trust you and raise your credibility only.
Yeah. I love it. Oh, guys, that was the best. I am so happy that you stopped here today to talk to us. If you have any other questions for Lauren or Natasha, I'm sure they both have authentic, wonderful LinkedIn presences. Is there any other way to connect? Yeah. Yeah. So let us know if you have additional questions. There was a lot of chatter. I see Kira saying that she always made movies her sort of hook. So that's great. I love that. And I love speaking to what Natasha said earlier, which is hiring diverse teams and making sure that people have different perspectives, but then also being really realistic about, if you're 20 years old, no one expects you to be the 45-year-old author of sales thought leadership. So I love that. Okay, well, thanks so much. We'll send you the recording, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Such a pleasure.
Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Natasha.
Bye.